right, what up, y'all? Happy Sunday night. It's your host, Wes Seiler, with Refounding Fathers and the Berking Conservative. I am so happy to be joined by Kyle Walton, my libertarian friend. Good to see you, buddy. How you doing?
Hey, man. How you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing great. And then
All right.
Christopher Souza, my liberal friend. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. I'm thriving. It's daylight savings time, so I've got some natural light coming in at 6:30 p.m. and that always makes me feel great because I get the seasonal affective disorder, which is of course where we get the word sad from, and
Yeah.
I love when it is brighter outside longer.
Me too, man. Like it's just starting to get dark now. I mean, what time? It's 8:30 Central, and it's just dark. So it's fun being able to take a walk and it not have to end. Because it's pitch black, right? I did a 5K the other day for St. Patty's. It was fun. People starting to get out and about, bring their dogs. Church is starting to fill back up. Like a lot of good things going on in the world, and so we're starting to turn the corner on COVID and get past it, and people get back.
Hey, I got a question for you, Wes.
Yeah, hit me.
When you run 5Ks, do you always wear a costume?
I'll have to get a picture.
Dressed like a normal person.
I normally do. We have out here in Florida. We've been open for a while, so we've done a couple of 5Ks recently, and I think we talked about this. I'm normally not a big holiday person, but I just feel like it's so needed. So we did like a Santa Claus run, and dude, I suited up. I had like a camo Santa Claus outfit.
It had to be so hot, man.
Dude. So what I learned with it is you got to take the beard off before you start running. That was kind of like the breaking point. I'll chug it out in Santa boots and everything else and that. But if you can't breathe, that's kind of difficult. It gets messy and kind of ugly. So I did learn that. So this leprechaun for St. Patty's Day, and the Irish, right? They can take it. They're not easily offended. So I don't think they had any problem with it. At least not that I've heard of. I guess I'll find out. If I get my house, egged or something here pretty soon.
That's right.
But it was fun. It was a good time. So I'm glad that things are getting back to normal. I'm excited. I think that you got Easter coming up. It's going to be great. And especially in Florida. I mean, I feel like DeSantis has done a lot of good things to be able to open up the economy, and some parts of it are still kind of closed down, but by and large, it's starting to pay off. So I can't complain. I really can't. So how's California, Chris?
It's great. It's been really rainy for the last week, so I haven't really been able to enjoy the benefits of daylight savings time. Today is really the first day that it has been sunny as long as it has been today. Yeah. So that's nice. I've got my second vaccination appointment in 1 week, so I'm super excited for that.
Yeah.
And we already have some friends who have a post-COVID party planned where everyone attending will be someone who is vaccinated. So that's super exciting as well.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun.
And hey, got a question for you. Got a question for you too, Chris. Have you signed the recall Newsom petition out there? We haven't really talked about that much.
No, we haven't.
I have not. I have my own issues with Newsom, but the groups that are behind the Recall Newsom campaign are not groups that I find particularly want to include me, nor do I want to be included by them. So, I have not signed that.
Interesting. We might have to do a whole show on that. I'm excited about getting into some of those issues. So we're getting ahead. We're jumping into politics already. I love it. I do want to introduce a new segment. We've been talking about doing this for a long time. So, I mean, we've already broken the ice. But just to break it even further, take a look at my Photoshop skills here for a media moment. I feel like, we always talk about politics. We're starting to talk about philosophy and some of these deep cultural issues and how we relate to them and apply our belief system to them. But, one of the biggest points of disagreement I've ever had with Chris especially is over movies, and especially DC versus Marvel and all of that stuff. That somehow we can be civil with everything else but that. So I figured people would love to hear us go back and forth. And, Kyle, we've got to talk Snyder Cut, because I'm pretty sure that Zack Snyder is a libertarian. So there's libertarian thought throughout so much of his movies. So we got to bring you into this, man. So that brings me
no doubt he'll ruin it for everybody. No doubt.
So that's brings me to this segment, which we'll start doing, I think, every show for about 5 minutes. So if there's a specific movie that's coming out or something that you want us to talk about, we'll put it in our media moment. What everybody's talking about now is the Snyder Cut of Justice League. And I want to, just in case you haven't seen it, I haven't seen it yet. I've been kind of waiting, wanted to get some reactions first. I did try to make it through the original and was unsuccessful. Justice League, I thought it was terrible. But let me show you the short version of the trailer of Justice League, since everybody's watching it on HBO Max. Here.
I heard about you. Didn't think you were real.
Your guilt's have become your reason.
Hate is useless.
I will come for my great prize.
If you want the Batman, here is something that can help you.
I have a stake in this war, and it's time I started fighting for it.
You've fulfilled your promise.
I spent a lot of time trying to divide us. I need to bring us together and make this right.
All right, so that's like the 1 minute version. I hear the movie's like, what, 3 hours long?
It's 4 hours. It is 4 hours, Wes.
I don't have 4 hours of time during the week, so I don't know when I'm going to watch this. I mean, that's like Lord of the Rings stuff to me. So I don't know when that's going to happen. But thank goodness I have you guys to be able to help me navigate through this, because I'm telling you, I couldn't make it through the original Justice League. So, Chris, I know you've seen the full thing. Is that right?
I have.
So give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, the trailer is a pretty good encapsulation of the movie. It is a lot of vague, meaningless, pretentious dialogue set alongside very dark images. I have so many mixed feelings about this thing. I am a DC fan from way back. We've talked before about how I have not been a fan of Zack Snyder's version of the DC universe. Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman. I think it was very clear that Zack Snyder did not really get the characters. And then, Joss Whedon took over on Justice League after the very tragic death of Zack Snyder's daughter. And so I do feel happy for him that he was able to complete this because it was a passion project for him, and it was something that meant a lot to him, and he had to leave under very tragic circumstances. And of course, Joss Whedon was an idol of mine growing up, and then he's kind of been revealed in the last few months to be pretty abusive on set and really a problematic person.
Yeah.
But I felt like he understood these characters on a much deeper level. And, Justice League, the theatrical cut, was not a great movie, but I walked out of that movie with a giant smile on my face. And the only reason for that is because Superman smiled in it. And Superman cracked jokes and winked at the camera, and he raced to the Flash. And that was all I wanted from these movies. Zack Snyder decided to take all that out and fill it with just a series of baffling choices and extend this incredibly thin plot to 4 hours for no reason, which includes one of the most baffling endings I have ever seen, that not only shows that he doesn't understand the DC characters, but he even is undoing his own work that he's done on Batman versus Superman. The character arcs that he's built up over the course of the series, he completely undoes at the end of this movie. And I won't say any more without spoiling it, but man, what a bummer this was.
I've heard before that every moment in a Zack Snyder film is great, which means that none of the moments are. Right? That's the short criticism of
every moment. There are no small moments, so there are no big moments. It just becomes numbing.
Right. What do you think, Kyle?
So I'm not the biggest comic book movie fan. I think I've kind of talked about that in our chat, but I do like these movies. I watch them. They're not my favorite things. I was a little comic booked out, but in general, I do like the DC comic book movies specifically better than the Marvel movies. Although, I think I said in our chat today that I fell asleep for 20. It was a long time. It was 20 or 30 minutes during the first Man of Steel, during that fight scene, and I woke up and I leaned over to my buddy and was like, "Hey, did I miss anything?" And he was like, "Nah, man, same fight scene." So, I think that's kind of been that's how I felt about every single one of these Justice League movies so far. I haven't seen this one, so I'm not gonna hold off judgment. Gonna hold off judgment for now, but I like the idea of this segment. I'll kind of speak to that for a second. They say politics is downstream from culture. If you want to influence politics, you don't go right for politics. You start with culture.
Yeah.
And so what happens in media, what happens in movies, trickles down to our political landscape. So I think it's a really cool segment, and I'm excited to do it.
Look, what I would hope, would occur in some of these movies, because I've always thought of the DC as a little bit more of the darker or more adult type, counterpoint to Marvel, right? Which Marvel's like kids can enjoy all the way up to adults for the most of it. Obviously, you get into like Deadpool and stuff, not so much, but like so much of it is kind of like a polarized good versus evil. It's very clear who's on one side. If there's any change whatsoever, it's like, oh my goodness, like extremely in your face. Whereas I would hope in DC, it's a little bit more nuanced. And that's what I was hoping for in Batman versus Superman and some of these other things where it's like you're not really sure who the good guy is, because, that just kind of speaks more to the truth of human nature and how complicated we all are. And we all have kind of the good and bad, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type thing going on within each one of us. So I'd hope for that kind of nuance. But, like based on what you're saying, Christopher, and like what I've heard from other people, it's very likely that he's like fallen off the rails on this, like overcompensating, which to me, that's what happened in the Star Wars movies too. Is you had a guy who was going in one direction, and then with The Last Jedi, like it kind of fell off, and then they compensated too much with fan service to the point that there really like was no story. And that's probably what's happening here. Because that Ben Affleck's not coming back to do this role anymore, and the original, I think idea of it was to have numerous different movies, a whole universe, and that's toast. So like, where are they even going? Like.
Yeah.
I will say, if you do want to see a nuanced take on Superman, where he actually does tackle adult issues, the new CW show Superman and Lois is Superman tackling fatherhood, and it does show that you can have Superman in a world that is complex. It's about him moving back to his hometown of Smallville, and they get into a lot of political issues in a way that I think will be interesting to both conservatives and liberals. And it is a serious take, but it's still Superman. He's still warm. He's still, someone who does the right thing, but he's facing some really complex issues that his powers don't necessarily give him the ability to handle any better than any average Joe. So it's fascinating.
One of the things I watched the other day, because it's not 4 hours, is I watched Batman Begins, which is on Netflix, right? Like, going back to it, it's not bad. I was like, Liam Neeson just does such a great job in that film, like being the villain and everything. So there's definitely good DC movies out there. It's just, I kind of doubt this one is is part of that, and so I'm not sure I'm going to spend the 4 hours. But hey, if you do, let us know what you think. Let us know if you agree with Chris's take on it here, if you've seen something different in it that is redeeming. I don't know, but we'll get into that with each of these segments, is getting into our takes on different movies. So I'm happy to do that. But getting to the meat of tonight's show, I do want to really pick up where we left off in terms of talking about libertarianism. Kyle did a great job of just kind of breaking down the belief system that he adheres to, what libertarian is, what it's not, getting into the definition, which I think is very important. And immediately, of course, there was a lot of like questions from me and Chris, kind of double teaming up on that, because neither one of us are libertarian, which that was fun, not having to defend anything and to attack you. But there were a lot of comments that came in. I think we got probably like half a dozen comments real quick through that last part of the show, and we didn't get a chance to do them justice. And Lena had a great one, and I wanted to give you time now, Kyle, to respond to it, and I'll read it to you. She said that she wasn't trying to start a debate on pro-life, and maybe this can be discussed on another show, which, we can definitely get into that. That's really what this is about, is whatever topic we want to. But specifically, she said, Kyle, you mentioned right to life, but on a previous show that she had watched, you also said we shouldn't shut down the country because the COVID deaths are less than 1%. To her, it seems a bit contradicting to advocate for reopening the country and economy, which puts people's lives in danger, but also preach about the right to life. So I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Lena, really thoughtful. And I wasn't able to kind of cogitate on it as much as I like to, but I do have kind of a quick reply for you. So I would say this. I would say that both reopening the country and advocating for the right to life are both congruent with the fighting for liberty, or with the fight for liberty. In fact, I'd say that both positions are fundamentally about the preservation of life and self-determination. Shutting down the economy tells individuals that they're not allowed to make a living for their families, especially when the government shuts those jobs down. I'd say this: any job that helps put food on the table, puts a roof over someone's head, puts medicine in the cupboard, is an essential job, and the government has no business shutting it down. Furthermore, I think if you look at the rates of like suicide and domestic violence and other crimes which endanger life, all of those things skyrocketed in times of economic turmoil. It did in the 2008 financial crisis, and it did here as well. You can look at the numbers of domestic violence and suicides; they both went up since lockdowns started last March and April. Even aside from giving people the right to determine how they make a living for their family, without government deciding what is essential and non-essential, I would say that it's an issue of voluntarism. If you look back, that's one of the terms that we really discussed last week. One of the 4 key points of what I believe it is to be a libertarian. So I would say that workers and companies enter into a voluntary agreement for labor and compensation. Right? No one is forcing them to come to that agreement. No one is saying you have to work for this company and they have to pay you X amount. There's a minimum wage, but that's an argument for another day. But for the majority of people, they're not making minimum wage. They're making a wage higher than that. But government and everyone's right to work is a violation of that agreement. Furthermore, no one is going to force individuals into the world if the country is open. So, I mean, this goes back to what it is to have a voluntary society. Say the country is open. No one is going to force you out of your home. You are welcome to stay within your home, within your apartment. You're able to wear whatever protective equipment you like. You can sanitize whatever you like, anything like that. So I would argue that both of those things, both reopening the country and fighting for abortion, are both arguments for the preservation of the most fundamental right, which is the right to life.
What do you think, Chris?
I think that was an interesting response and definitely very well articulated. However, I think you're only tackling one aspect of each problem when it comes to the problem of the pandemic, as well as the balancing test required for the morality of abortion. I think that the economy started to suffer before the lockdowns. The economy was already in a downturn shortly before the lockdowns because of the pandemic, because people were afraid to go to the movie theater, go to restaurants. It's not like these lockdowns just happened spontaneously. They were a response to the pandemic. And I also think that when it comes to a pandemic, yes, you can say that like everyone can make their own individual choices, but that's not how you fight pandemics. Fighting pandemics does require collective action. So I think just focusing on the economic impact of the lockdowns is a mistake. I also think just focusing on the rights of the fetus and not the rights of the person who the fetus is, for lack of a better word, occupying, is also a mistake. You mentioned voluntarism, the idea that an employer and an employee enter into a contract together and come to an agreement. A fetus doesn't make that agreement with a woman. There's no voluntarism or volunteering to be pregnant when it comes to a woman who wants an abortion. And yes, the right to life is sacrosanct, but when it comes to balancing the right to life of a fetus and the right to bodily autonomy of a woman, I know women have rights. Like I know they have sentience. I know they have free will and consciousness. When it comes to a first trimester or second trimester fetus, I don't know that. So I feel like I have to privilege the rights of the pregnant person over the rights of the fetus so much as they exist.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting. I want to bring us to kind of our main topic because I knew we were going to get into the abortion debate, and I posted a lot of pro-life stuff on the channel. But we have people that are pro-choice or pro-abortion, however you want to call it, that are, and I respect them. And I respect I've had really good discussions, and so many times it comes down to what are we doing to take care of mothers who are in this decision-making process? Is there options for them? Is society just focused on, having the child and then nothing else? What happens after that? Is that all put on a single mom? If that was the case, do we have a discussion about that? If we talk about adoption, there's a lot of work that goes into adoption, and sometimes people aren't educated on that, or they don't, have the resources. They don't have access to it. They need to be informed on that type of thing, and who's going to help them do that? There's all these other questions that come out of it, and so I love having discussions on that. But I think what's interesting is almost every leading politician that is in the Republican Party is pro-life, and almost every leading politician in the Democratic Party is pro-choice, right? Like it just almost right down the middle. There's a few exceptions here and there and all that kind of
Not
stuff.
always the case,
Go ahead, sorry.
which was not always the case.
Not always the case,
Prior-
but it's increasingly, and so much on the conservative side, so many people vote for politicians that they wouldn't otherwise because of this, because they see, they see this issue so black and white, and they don't want to give any ground. Hey, we'll vote for this person even if we don't like him or her, because at least they're pro-life, right? But in the Libertarian Party and amongst libertarians, it seems like that's not the case. It's really interesting to me that within a party or within an ideology that prides itself on purism, that they're so mixed on this issue. So I don't know if you wanted to address that, Kyle. I know you've talked about it before on this show, but do you see any resolution coming in that? Like if they can't decide on this issue that's divided the existing top parties, how would they ever be able to compete?
Well, so I guess I could kind of tie into a later point about like what I think the end goal for libertarians are. But just to address your question before we move on, libertarians, like any other party, is not a monolith. I mean, you say in this particular issue, they do seem to be rather monolithic. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think many Republicans are kind of tending towards a more moderate position on abortion, where many on the left are going to an even more extreme position on that. And so that middle ground, it does tend to shift. But to answer the question directly, libertarians historically have probably actually been pro-abortion because they have seen it as the right of the mother or the right of the host, if you want to think it that way, to make the decision that the baby did not enter into agreement, or the fetus did not enter an agreement, like Chris said, with the mother. What I would argue is there's two things. Most of the people who originally formed that position, I of them, Murray Rothbard, I think being another, existed at a time where DNA was not a thing. They didn't know what DNA was, and they didn't understand how it worked. Yeah. Now we understand that at the moment of conception, that fetus has its own unique identity, its own unique DNA, literally from the moment of conception. And so that is an individual person, and therefore I believe that it's a person with individual rights. And that's why I hold the position that I do. I would also argue that it holds to the non-aggression principle, which, if you go back again, that's one of the four kind of key terms, that the non-aggression principle would apply in this situation as well. The mother, except for in cases of rape and incest, which accounts for anywhere between 0.1 and 1% of all abortions. So we'll say in the vast majority, over 99% of abortions, the mother volunteered to engage in an act in which pregnancy was a consequence or risk. So I would say that she did willfully enter into that negotiation, into that agreement, and then also as an individual cannot be aggressive towards another individual, in this case, the fetus in her body. So.
Yeah, I wanted to go to a comment here from Austin. It's really good. And so he says he's personally very pro-life, but he's noticed that there's been a constant or consistent decrease in abortions over the past 15 to 20 years. There has been a more drastic decrease under a Democratic president. So he poses the question, is making it illegal a better option, or is making it unnecessary better? I've been wrestling with that myself, is what he says recently, and he's, again, pro-life. So what do you think about that, Chris? Is that how you see abortion? Do you see it as something that you agree should be ideally taken out of existence just through other means, or do you think that it should be a viable option regardless?
No, I absolutely sympathize with Austin's point. I am also for zero abortions. No one is pro-abortion. No one thinks that is a positive outcome. I believe that we do need to eliminate the need for it. Now, the solutions to that are solutions that most libertarians and most conservatives are not amenable to, because it does require government aid. It does require subsidize contraception. But if you look at it from a practical point of view rather than an ideological point of view, that is what works. There are so many studies demonstrating that subsidizing contraception is the number one tool when it comes to reducing abortion. As for the moral case, I don't think necessarily that DNA is the moral dividing line that Kyle seems to believe that it is. I mean, if we met like aliens who had similar levels of intelligence as us, we would be morally required to treat them as people with rights, despite the fact that they share different DNA. To me, the moral is sapience, intelligence, that, you know, human beings have, that people have, that human fetuses up until a certain point in pregnancy don't have yet, because they don't have a functioning moral cortex. They cannot feel or experience or think in the way that even a third trimester fetus can. So to me, that is the moral dividing line more so than DNA.
See, I mean, that's why this show works, right? It's the fact that we can have this type of discussion on these hot button issues, and we can find a point of agreement, right? I respect everything that you just said. And God knows there are all kinds of conservatives out there that give conservatism a bad name, okay? So I have a glass house, and I fully admit that with what I'm about to say. But there are liberal and democratic activists who don't share your sense of common sense. Like, there's the Shout Your Abortion campaigns out there.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Organizations exist where they say, quote, abortion is normal. Our stories are ours to tell. Shout out your abortion and celebrate it. Like, that drives me nuts, Chris. Like, because that's not your position. Go ahead.
It is not my position. I don't feel like I am in a position to judge them, since I have never and will never be in the circumstance of finding myself with an unwanted pregnancy. At the same time, I do see how it doesn't create great optics. Right. And I do understand your frustration.
Right, because if we can get to a point, like with what Austin's saying, what Kyle is saying, what I'm saying, what you're saying is that let's get it to a situation where people aren't in this very difficult, problematic point of having to make a choice between a pregnancy that they never planned for, didn't intend, they're going to be struggling with for the rest of their life, or versus, hey, what I want, which is to have a kid when I'm prepared for it, right? Let's get them out of that terrible, choice, right, and get them into a good situation. We have to agree that abortion is not a good option. Whether it should be illegal, whether it should be, like Austin is suggesting, based upon circumstances and education and wealth, whatever it is, not something people have to face. I can talk about that. Like, that's fine. But then you bring in somebody, if you bring somebody into this show who's like, it's totally normal. It should be it's a great thing. It should be part of our lives. Everybody should do it. Go have an abortion. Like, what? What? That just flies in the face of science and everything that we're talking about from a moral standpoint. And that's what makes this so hard, is those extremist positions. So I'm just grateful. I just want to acknowledge to you that I'm grateful for people who move to the center. If Kyle's talking about, hey, maybe, groups are moving to the center, that can be a good thing if this is what the center is if we're getting to a point where we're trying to figure out ways to solve the problem. But for people who don't even acknowledge it as a problem, that is so hard for me to get my head around. And it's just fodder for the extremists on the conservative side who castigate every single Democrat as being that extreme. So I'm glad you're not, Chris, and I wish you well in that take. And if that's the type of people that you have in the Libertarian Party, Kyle, then it makes a little bit more sense to me. But it's the extremist ones that I just don't understand that. I really don't.
Absolutely, yeah. And if I could just kind of close out some thoughts on this, I just want to say that from a personal perspective, if if a woman's had abortion, that doesn't make her an evil person. It's just a decision that people are put into, unfortunately, and for one reason or another, they chose an option that I don't personally agree with. But I can be very sympathetic to someone who is put in that situation and feels like they don't have a choice. I feel like we do need to do a much better job of talking about other options, as making adoption easier, making adoption more affordable, finding ways, other solutions as well. And just a couple of other thoughts here. The first is Chris talked about sentience. I don't know that sentience is the best standard for for what determines life, that can be applied to a number of circumstances outside of this situation. So I think you're right. Maybe DNA is not the litmus test. I think that it is, but also I don't know if sentience is the solution either. But I will say this: there are three things that are common in totalitarian governments around the world from the beginning of history, including 21st century now, and that is that genocide, euthanasia, and abortion are all prevalent in totalitarian societies. And those, just by virtue of the fact that they exist, should be things that I believe we should run from as a free society. So,
well, that's kind of like one of the deeper points that I have on this is that what Burke gives me, the philosopher, is kind of a questioning of things that we don't normally question, right? Is like people say right to life, and everybody, we love it, right? It sounds great. It sounds good. We believe in it, but we were talking about rights last show, and it's while I appreciate the sentiment that Jefferson and Adams and Franklin put into that, and it's like enshrined in everything that is America, life is not something the government can give, nor is it something that they can fully protect, right? Like the right to life, as we were talking about, is violated all the time. Even if you didn't have abortion in this country, you have all kinds of other problems that can occur up to the point that a child is born, and then all of a sudden there's problems after that too. Like if you've had a kid, those first 2, 3, 4 years, and even past that, are nerve-wracking. Like, we put like a little sock on our kid's foot so they don't, succumb to SIDS or something like that, right? I mean, I walk my kids down the street today, and I'm like, hold your hands because I want you to be safe with cars going by the street, right? Like, there are all these threats and dangers in the world, and ultimately, your right to life is going to be extinguished at some point, whether it's, tomorrow or 60, 70 years from now. So this is like flowery language, the right to life, but there's only so much a government can do to protect that so-called right. And it's not even something that is fully given to us because bad things happen all the time. And to me, that is what makes the debate so difficult, is that we talk about a right to life as if everybody should be entitled to this, and yet realistically none of us can really, we can only do so much, to protect it, right? And that to me is not something that I would admit conservatives spend enough time wrestling with, is we act like this is the only situation in which the right to life is snuffed out. It happens all the time for all kinds of reasons, right? So it's simply that we don't want to see it occur as a matter of convenience when it can be avoided. And I think that's why I come back to the pro-life cause, is I don't want to see abortion utilized as an easy response when there could be something else that we can do. But that would be my solution to anything. So we're worried about foreign threats and terrorism. Let's figure out some type of way where we can do something so that we at least make it difficult for the terrorists, right? As long as we're doing what we can, what's realistic and feasible to protect people's lives and their life, then I think we're doing the right thing. And when we disagree on that, that's when it gets complicated. So go ahead, Chris. Let's go ahead and start to end this out. So let's do one more comment from each of us to close it out. So any final thoughts, Chris?
I totally sympathize with your desire to see the different degrees within each movement. I mean, you have Lena's comment right here that says, I'm pro-life, shocking, yeah. I know, and I agree with Chris. I mean, the way that people identify does not necessarily always match up how you think it will with the policy prescriptions they propose. If you look at polls, most Americans prefer to identify as pro-life rather than pro-choice. But then if you ask them the question in a different way, should abortion in this period be legal? Should it be illegal? The answers aren't necessarily what you think they will be. 60% of Catholic people think that abortion should remain legal as it is currently today. So it is definitely an issue where there are so many different points that go beyond just pro-choice and pro-life. You're right, there are extremists. There are people who say, on the left, that fetus is not alive. And I think that's absolutely just completely a wrong-headed thing to say. Scientifically, the issue is not whether they are alive. The issue is whether they should be considered persons with rights. And then after that, whether those rights outweigh the right to bodily autonomy of the pregnant person. So very complex issue that deserves a lot more than just the simple boilerplate messages we hear from our politicians.
Yeah, and Kyle.
Man, I just want to say that I really have appreciated this conversation. Appreciate Lena jumping, Chris, very thoughtful points. Wes, very thoughtful points as well. I've kind of said everything that I want to say. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed our conversation. And I do have a question for Chris, though. He mentioned he's a big Joss Whedon fan. And I got to ask, man, are you a fan of Firefly?
I love Firefly. Of course I love Firefly.
We're going to have a lot more media moments.
One more thing we can agree on, buddy. I love it.
No, I agree with you, Kyle. Like, these discussions can happen. Like they can definitely happen. We can see nuance between each other. I think we lost Chris there real quick, but we can see the nuance between each of us, and we can have a fruitful discussion if we are focused on that. But I think there's so many sides of this debate where people just want to stay in the corners because they want to just add fuel to the fire and go back and forth and all that stuff. So I'm grateful for you guys. I'm glad that we don't. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you, Kyle. I'll catch up with Chris here in a minute, fix that connection with him. But thank you all for the great show. Don't forget theberkinconservative.com. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Hit us with some more topics. If you have more about this, you want us to talk about, deep topics, we're clearly happy to do it. So just let us know. We'll be happy to do that next time. So thank you, Kyle, and I'll catch up with you next week.
Yeah, thank you, man.